Mexican cartels are increasingly using bombs against the Mexican government.
This video is brought to you by BlackGunsMatterShop.com. Get all of your pro-liberty, pro-gun, pro-freedom solutionary gear at BlackGunsMatterShop.com.
I'm reading a story. There's been over 42 suspects, police, and soldiers, because the Mexican army's been involved in these bombings where Mexican cartels are fighting back or pushing back against the state. I think there's been about 260 incidents where there's been recorded incidents of drones, like video game drones with bombs, bombing certain areas. So obviously this means that the Mexican cartel is armed and willing to defend their turf or their profit margins in the drug war. This brings up a few things. One, the war on drugs has been one of the most useless, vain, unconstitutional, and I know some of y'all are going to say, well, that's Mexico. They don't have the same type of constitution, but it's still a human right. The Constitution is based on human rights. But it's just a war that's been kind of like designed to increase military budget spending and empower the prison industrial complex. So, for example, when you have countries like Portugal that say, hey, we're going to decriminalize all so-called hard drugs. We're also not going to help you if you're trying to rehab. We're not going to put tax dollars towards getting you off of drugs, and we're not going to lock you up for possession or having these drugs or usage of these drugs. Within 2 years in Portugal, violent crime dropped about 80%. The drug usage and the drug trade is supported by violence when there has to be turf and illegality associated with it. The war on drugs isn't necessarily a war on drugs itself. It's more of a war on people's choices. Most of the people watching this, you guys know that if heroin was legal tomorrow, you wouldn't use it because you know what heroin will do to you. Same concept. If the people of Mexico choose to smoke Mexican swag or take fentanyl and the government's not involved, then anyone that wants to sell it or buy it, they just be doing commerce. But then the prison industrial complex wouldn't be able to fill its jails with a bunch of people for non-violent possession of a plant. This speaks to that failed war, as well as the government's involvement in wanting to lock people up for choices that they make. Now, I know that some of you will feel like drugs are bad. Drugs are bad. Drugs impact people's bodies, so forth and so on. And I agree with you. But we get more people to not take drugs by educating them about drugs, as opposed to creating legislation. And this legislation has been there for however long, and there's still 260 cases of bombings with drones because of defending the profits from the drug war. This also speaks to this argument that, oh, the Mexican people, if governments in America would have more restrictions on their Second Amendment, then the guns wouldn't travel south of the border into Mexico. 260 drone bombings. That means a robot was used to drop a bomb on a location, and over 40 suspects, soldiers, and regular folk hurt in those scenarios. We're not talking about guns. We're talking about something that damn near seems like it's out of the future. A robotic drone dropping bombs. Guys, this fallacy and this straw man argument that somehow our access to firearms to defend ourselves in America is damaging the rest of the world, including our northern borders in Canada and our southern borders in Mexico, is just another farce. This is literally people figuring out ways to be violent to get around the rules that government has put in place that does not respect people's right to choose. You and I may choose different as it relates to what we put in our bodies, but at the same time, as governments across the world are saying it's because of the Second Amendment and we have to defend and health and so forth and so on, and there's certain things that you should not have the right to put in your body. While they're saying that, they're also saying we will stop you from having a job if you don't take our experimental gene therapy in the form of a jab. The contradictions are all around. Another last point to this contradiction. This speaks to government's weakness and inability to respect the rights of the people. Around the world, cannabis is the largest consumed so-called drug. based on illegal drugs. Most states in America have some sort of, respect for people that choose, whether they have glaucoma, whether they use it for whatever medicinal purpose. But it's still Scheduled 1, meaning federally it's still Scheduled 1. And even in America, like in Mexico, maybe not to the same extent, but you're having turf wars around the profit around something as simple as cannabis, even though it's legal in many states. This speaks to government's weakness, and this includes the Mexican government, and not wanting to respect the will of its people. If the Mexican people choose to smoke cannabis, that's their choice. If the people in America choose to smoke cannabis, there's no reason that it should still be Scheduled 1 federally. The war on drugs is a sham. It has been a massive failure. It does not support the freedom of the people, and it only encourages violence as well as retaliatory violence from the government in the name of defending the people against the war on drugs. This should stop. This wanton violence is a clear-cut example of government involvement in free market enterprise and its failures to do so, and it does not make the standard of living better for the Mexican people nor the American people. You guys tell me what you think. Let's have this discussion in some of the groups over at solutionaryuniversity.org. Should we crack down or continue? Maybe a few more years of the war on drugs and accepting some of the violence will actually solve it. Do you think that this should be decriminalized? Do you think that this should be something that education could solve as opposed to attempting to have more legislation? And are the deaths associated with this extremely profitable business okay because we're going after the bad guys? You tell me what you think in the comment section, guys. And it's very important that we're remembering that our ability to keep and defend arms from not just government, but also cartels in any part of the world is a human and natural right, not granted by government, not taken away by government. Be safe, be solutionary.